Well, thank you for joining us again. I am overly excited for our next guest, my favorite mayor, the mayor of Scottsdale, Mayor Jim Lane. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so honored.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be with you, Kim, so thank you for inviting me to talk.
Get ready for the real estate show that takes you across the barriers and into the danger zone. That Bitchin' Real Estate Podcast with your host, Tenacious T.
Thank you. I want to jump right into a couple of, family questions. What does the Lane house look like during the holidays?
Well, that's interesting since we're empty nesters.
Exactly.
The Lane house actually is transferred to some other Lane houses most of the time.
Nice.
And it's activated and it's nice. And I generally have some of my sisters in town and other relatives of relatives,
yes,
in-laws and that. So it's nice. And occasionally we trade off. You know, so it's been very, very nice. But here in Scottsdale, it really has been energized in a way that we haven't had for many years. And it really was through a lot of help for some great people in the industries. I'm talking about our resort industry and, of course, our arts and cultural community. It's just really has picked up a bit, and it's really been received really well by our population.
We really have some of the, and I'm going to be bold enough to say, the best events in the world here in Scottsdale. And you're right. Our travel industry, our enthusiasm for the city, we now have cultural events. You just did the October 14th Indigenous Peoples Day. Not only are we embracing our original roots, but we're expanding and inviting all. And you'll see the different holidays and the different religions represented here in Scottsdale. And I think you're a big part of that.
Well, not to put too much emphasis on some of the efforts that I and others have done, but really it has been an interesting, over the last nearly 11 years now in the mayor's office, to really get much more engaged with the different elements of the population and to invite them here. I've been successful in bringing a number of big events that were held in other areas that can be much better managed and are much more exciting having them in Scottsdale. Yes. And it's proven to be very successful for just about every one of those groups that really wants to have an awareness of their culture. They want to all be Americans, but nevertheless, it's just so nice to be able to understand people a little bit better.
Yes. I believe you have a huge partnership, obviously, with the Salt River Fields and the different things that we're doing across the valley. And yes, bringing in those big events. What is your favorite event that comes in?
For all of those groups out there that I meet with on a routine basis, it's going to be a little difficult to pick a favorite, yes. But I will tell you one that really was particularly nice, and it actually goes to your original sort of assessment, or I should say projection onto the indigenous people and, frankly, the tribal lands that surround us. We've maintained for the past at least 11 years very good relationships with both SRP, MIC, and Fort McDowell, Yavapai, and frankly, the Gila River as well. It's been very, very strong. But one thing that came to us just a few years ago, I think we're 3 years into this now, but during the Parada del Sol, we have a festival downtown. And for the first time, this would be 3 years ago, I think it's 24 tribes in this state. Now, some of them are on different, they're combined on reservations or on tribal lands together. But nevertheless, all the tribes in the state of Arizona were represented in Scottsdale. And we coordinate that with Parada del Sol, which is our own sort of cultural event as well, and the rodeo and that. And of course, in some instances, they participated in the past. But to have all the tribes decide that this here in Scottsdale was the place, they felt the most welcomed. And frankly, they're
very
brought
true
together.
As a little girl in 1983, when we first moved here, we lived off of Indian Bend in Pima, and Pima was a dirt road. And I distinctly remember when we began the project of the 101 freeway, and always in the newspaper, the just continuous talks, and it was It was a soft meeting. There was no discourse that I remember. And I think, especially as you came in, and obviously my thoughts of you are very fond because you've always helped the firefighters and the police officers. But as you came in, I feel like you kind of put that on steroids, and you've really concentrated not only making the city better, but bringing us together as a city.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, we do try. It really is a conscious effort to do just exactly that. You know, the fact is, we are better together. And when I say that, I mean, it doesn't mean that we sacrifice our individual identities or otherwise, or that we frankly have to somehow, become clones of one another or anything like that. But at the same time, as you've heard me say this probably many times, one of my favorite proclamations since about 4 or 5 years old now, and that is the Golden Rule Proclamation, and where just people respecting each other as they would like to be respected. And that's really, I also tell people I grew up with the idea of loving your neighbor as yourself, and I've often told people that's a pretty high bar all the time, So, I mean, if we could just respect each other, we can end up with friendship, and friendship may end up with that love factor as well.
Absolutely. That actually reminds me of, well, my husband Pete, his favorite movie is The Quiet Man. And he likes that movie because a couple of guys can get together in some fisticuffs and then have a drink afterward and a conversation. That's really where you're most productive, is when you can have an intelligent discourse.
Well, wait a minute. Fisticuffs don't necessarily.
We're gonna turn that over into today's thing. Right. Intelligent discourse, disagree, yet still have that drink and be friends in the end.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's a matter of personalities. I mean, there's an awful lot of disruption in that kind of sensibility about one another, and frankly, civility with one another, where there's an intense desire that you accept one position and that there is no give or take in those kinds of things. And so we deal with that, and we deal with it on an ongoing basis. And you try to maintain your own sensibility and your own civility as best you can. And we all have our moments, I have to admit.
I was yelling at the husband this morning, hurry up, get the thing.
So in any case, but at the same time, it's important to be working together on these things, and how we get much more accomplished in those times when we can't find ourselves there. Yeah, it's difficult. On just a little bit of a political line, when we talk about the tribes and their interaction with the non-tribal part of the state, of course, we do on an ongoing basis, and of course, their sovereignty is not unlike the state's sovereignty. They're still on federal trust land, and they're Americans, but they have a level of sovereignty that the states are still trying to maintain according to our Constitution. But they have engaged with the non-tribal members of the community on all levels. And one of the big things, and it really was a prominent display of just that level of collaboration and cooperation, was DCP, which is the Drought Contingency Plan, if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Now, for the past 10 plus years, 10, 11 years, I've been on and have been served as president for a number of years too, but of the AMWA, which is Arizona Municipal Water Users Association. So I work very closely with the Department of Water Resources and also with CAP and SRP. That's what AMWA actually does, in addition to my own role as mayor of Scottsdale. Yeah. But working with all the cities and towns that are not only in AMWA, but those that are not across the state, the counties, the agricultural community, industry in general, the ranchers, and the tribes. Yeah. You might think that's an easy thing to accomplish when we all want to make sure we have water to go forward. But the thing is, everybody also wants to make sure they have water going forward.
That they have enough.
Yeah, and that somebody isn't trying to sort of undercut their sense of security in it. So it's not an easy area to deal with. In fact, you've heard this adage, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. Something I probably have that just a little off, but nevertheless.
Totally get it. Yes, because we have to remember too that everyone has different traditions and everyone has a different level of trust, and it takes a long time to build those relationships. And you have to earn them. And I guess that's part of the other reason why I wanted to have you on here is your term is coming up in 2020, and I don't want to lose you. Where are you going now, and where can we support you now? That's part of I'm mentoring young women who have been through hardships. I'm going to show them that they can be successful and give back at the same time. And they've just witnessed some of the things that you've said and now understand you are so for the people. What are you doing next, and how can we support you?
Well, it's interesting. Well, January 2021, there's a term limit, and that'll be the end of my time as mayor. So it's been a wonderful run, and I've really appreciated to have the opportunity to work for the citizens of Scottsdale, and a town I love. And frankly, for our state to the extent that I could contribute on those levels too in the region. But I will say that my first inclination is to get back into business, and that is I came out of the technology industry. I sold 2 technology companies, albeit small ones, but nevertheless, to some Canadians years ago. That's how I got into this, and it was sort of a fluke, and I probably have mentioned that too.
Yeah, you did.
But in any case, so I still have a bit of a longing to get back into it. It's a dynamic industry, and it's one I really do love as well. Yeah. And frankly, what it has to offer for people. I mean, there certainly are some drawbacks in privacy and some of the issues that have come up with data analytics and that. But nevertheless, it can be, and it has been so positive in so many areas that it's something that's important for me. But I'm trying to work that out. My wife's been retired for a couple of years now, and I'm not sure that diving into something too heavy is going to be is going to be right for me. I'm in that same age group.
Yeah, you're in that
a little older actually than she is.
You're in that transition where you want something to stimulate your brain, but at the same time you have a natural propensity to help people, and I can't see that you would give that up easily. No, and frankly, and I appreciate that thinking too, because it is one that I do struggle with a little bit, and it's a matter of staying engaged in something I love right now, and at what level, and how can I contribute, and trying to just make sure that I'm sort of checking whatever boxes that are on this sheet of paper that I'm looking at to say, what weighs one against the other, and so. There's in fact, it may even be a growing interest in the possibility of a statewide office. My wife is not particularly interested in me going back to D.C., which is another thing that I've been entertained. Yeah. I personally would love to see you write a book on values, because I think you have a lot to teach the young ones coming up because of your old school way of respect and value. Can we get a book from you, possibly?
I don't think that's necessarily my strength, but maybe I can get somebody to help me.
Yeah, exactly. But I would say, young ladies here today, you don't hear this from people, especially in the political field. And yes, we could go on forever about that, but there's something very relevant in the fact that I can literally think of you in all of the years that I've lived here, 38 years, and I can't think of a negativity. And I really would love to see something in writing or something they can read, or maybe a voice recording, because I think you can encourage that in the younger generation with everything going on.
Well, thank you very much. That's very complimentary of maybe what I always hope to be doing, in that sense. So. That's very nice of you to say, and frankly to prompt me into that kind of thinking, and maybe it is something I should be considering. I was always taught never to play yourself up too much. That's one of the reasons it was so difficult to run for office.
Absolutely.
That still lives with me for sure. I may have overcome some of some self-expression about ideas and thinkings that I think are important. But nevertheless.
What's interesting is Isaiah Acosta, he lives here in the Valley. He you were there. You saw him. I was fortunate to have him sit at my table, and I got to have a long conversation with him. And he, which is interesting, ladies, because Isaiah Acosta was born without a jaw, and I had a conversation with him. So that tells you the strength of that young man. He's 19 now, I believe. He said something very interesting. When you are living and speaking your truth, you command your own labels. you have lived and spoke your truth, and you have commanded those labels that I just gave you effortlessly, and you should be proud of those.
Well, thank you again. I didn't
You're such a humble guy.
I was saying to somebody the other day, you're going to make me blush.
There you go. There you go. So if I'm going to take these young ladies and really make a difference to different communities, which, the Paiute Center, our homeless, our senior citizens in the city of Scottsdale, where would you say the simplest thing to do for our public? Would that be the food donations and volunteer work? Where would you like to see the young people get more exposure and help your community?
Well, that's really is a tough one, because some of those questions are really, in the current conversation that takes place about homelessness, are somewhat unanswerable.
Yeah.
Because of the multiple of elements that go into that issue and that problem. And I would want to, before I say anything further, I'd want to temper my greatest motivation. Of course, I'm a businessman my entire life, and
sure.
what I brought to the office was important to think about. How do you maintain sustainable answers for the
yes.
largest number of people possible? And I've always found that to be in business. Scrupulous business people doing a great job, but nevertheless, being motivated by a free enterprise system, they can do fantastic things. And so whenever I travel abroad for sister cities, or frankly, people come to me and ask me in countries that really are not engaged in what we might consider free enterprise, I'd have to say, and I don't even talk in these terms often, but you're sort of prompted me to it. In a certain sense, I counsel them to the idea of a change in thinking about things. In fact, I'll give you a perfect example. We have a sister city in Uasin Kenya, and but independent of that, somehow or other, some legislators from Kenya came to see me, and they wanted to pick my brain as far as business and how could they transform their country, which is run terribly inefficiently.
Yes.
Remember, if you might know, that Kenya was a British protectorate for many years, and it went from that, and the Brits are pretty good as colonizers, if you will, if you ever want to put a positive on that.
My father was from England, so there you go.
But the thing is, the English, they actually, when they actually colonized, they often brought men and women, and they brought business, and they brought enterprise, and they brought an economic system that is not that departed from what we live and work with, and a business, a governmental system that provides for that platform. So they had some good infrastructure, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
They went right from there to communism, and then from communism, once they overthrew it, they're trying to get into a democracy, but the same people who were the communist elite, the leaders, really just don't even have a clue, nor are they motivated to turn over what power they had before.
Why would they be?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it was an interesting conversation, and I think it's one that they asked me to go and speak to their legislature, in Nairobi. And I'm not sure if I'm taking that on right now, but in any case, this is a few years ago. But in any case, those kinds of things and the sustainability of any kind of system where you're trying to help people, you've all heard the adage, you can feed a man with a fish for a day, teach a man to fish, and he can feed himself for a lifetime.
Yes.
And those are the kinds of things that are very simply put, but are so true in the world. I've been activated with the State Department and working with their State Department's foreign aid program, which I do not necessarily agree with in how it's executed, but I do agree with the principle behind it. And one of the things I've tried to tell them, back in June, I was back there discussing their budget and how it might be fixed to do something that might be more productive in the long run. It goes to that sustainability thing. Yeah. So if I were to look at you all and say, what are the things that you could say? There are so many great agencies and organizations that are trying to do things and do things. But unfortunately, until you get somebody motivated, until you can get somebody off drugs, if that happens to be it, until you get them in the frame of mind, maybe they're suffering from mental disease or otherwise, it is very difficult to say anything other than, here's a bed, here's some food, and this is your existence.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that existence. Nobody really wants that existence. I didn't mean to turn my back on you.
No, I can hear you just fine. So I totally agree with that. You have to show them, you have to be a solutionist. You have to show them a solution to dig their own way out. You can't dig it out for them, but you can show them how to do that. And they're going to make the choice to do it or they're not. And in a way, I would like to think, but by example and by consistency, we can save a few.
No, absolutely. Two things that come to mind. One is an organization that I more or less intensified in the Great Recession, and that was Operation Fix It. And I ended up putting together a fundraiser every year. It happens to be called my State of the Union, but nevertheless, that funded it. But we also brought in hundreds of community members to help people maintain their homes in the downturn.
Yep.
Because once your house starts to go south, and I don't mean it from a geographical standpoint, but in a financial kind of, and you're not either physically or financially able to maintain your property, there's an element that's called, or I should say a saying that says a broken window syndrome. It's a syndrome, I should probably have labeled it that way, that once somebody's window in a neighborhood gets broken, the neighborhood starts to go down. Values start to go down. Things just absolutely, get very different. And so it was very successful. At times we had 700 to 800 people within the community helping, and I like to label it neighbors helping neighbors. Much better than even government helping. Government is it's a job for a lot of folks. Neighbors helping neighbors is really... it's that added element of just somebody who wants to help somebody because they want to feel they get something from it because they've given something to it. And it's not taken from them and then given to them for somebody else.
I have actually taken part in the Scottsdale Area Association of Realtors. We've gone down, and it's usually senior citizens that don't have the funds. But again, one of your initiatives, I've scraped paint, I've painted, I've helped with weeding. And that is one of the things that my angels will be doing. I've also started a 501c3, and we want to be able to retrofit homes for vets and give away a house a year for our citizens in Scottsdale.
Well, I'll tell you, Kim, you're right on top of it, and you're probably in a better position almost than most and to advise others as to how to go about it. That's fantastic. Thank you for that from our community. And the other is an organization, Ted Turner. Do you know Ted?
The Ted Turner?
No, you don't know. I'm sorry.
I'm like, no, I don't.
You probably do know him, but no.
He's on my list. I'll get him on the show.
Family Promise is an organization that started up here just about the time that I came into the mayor's office about 11 years ago. And I met with Ted Turner, but not the Ted Turner. But they have an organization now. If you remember the Great Recession, and I'm sure we all do here, what the consequential effect was people being able to hold on to their jobs and thus maybe hold on to their homes. And frankly, the valuation of their homes were going south hugely. South Scottsdale was up to 50% devaluation, which represents most people's estate. It's what they have. It's the sort of the rock that was shrinking on them. But in order to protect that, Operation Fix It was one. But people did get displaced. And people became homeless who had never thought they would ever become homeless.
I remember.
Again. And Ted came in with a program. It's called Family Promise. And that was to bring families into a place where they could live. And there were periods of time so that they could get themselves an address, a place where they could clean up and where they weren't sleeping in a car.
Oh, I love that.
And they could go and they would be able to go to an interview for a job. All of those things that are just mightily important, but sort of incidental in the desperation of a homeless person.
That's a life-changing moment to get cleaned up, to shower, to brush your teeth. so that you can apply for a job?
So they have their own little dwellings, and the other one that was a major component, which sometimes is difficulty because government doesn't like this kind of thing too very much. The faith community got hugely involved with them to help them and bring them to their community and to have them get to know their community, not necessarily proselytizing, but nevertheless to bring them together and to feed them and those kinds of things. So tremendous number of volunteers and sponsors and active people getting involved in just helping families. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't other issues of single people out there, homeless, and that's another issue altogether. But there's a particular amount of sentiment for keeping families together. And a lot of institutions, at least it was when I was younger, a father could never go into housing.
Yeah.
Or a mother and the children could. So immediately broke families apart.
Yeah.
And so it was probably founded on some kind of thinking, but it was really,
right. It was an old-fashioned thinking. Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm going to embarrass you one more time. I like to say that our stories build community, and our community builds leaders, and our leaders go on to tell their stories so that they can build bigger communities. You are one of our leaders, and I'm so honored that you came on to my show.
Well, I am honored to be here, and certainly I can't thank you enough for those great compliments. They really are. I hope that they're deserved. Really.
They are. I don't say that lightly. You know that by now who I am, and I'm always speaking in truth. And again, girls, did you have any other comments or? I know, it's just amazing to be sitting here, right?
Yeah, I'm just really grateful. I feel very honored as well.
Yeah. Laura?
Like there's so many ideas now running in and out of my head and kind of opening new doors, and I'm starting to understand things differently and
thinking differently.
It's inspiring.
Yeah. See this little conversation that we had. That's what I'm talking about. Your book is needed. So
you're good receptors then too, and that's really important. It really is. Your minds are open and you've got that sensibility. It's got to be within you. Otherwise, you could easily, ignore it. And I'm not here talking in a directive kind of way. I like to think about things when you voluntarily learn something.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier reception.
Yeah.
It's like a choice.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you.
Always trying to learn more.
Yes. Joy is my currency, and I am full of joy right now. So again, this is Kimberly Toko.
This is Mary Lane. And glad to have been here.
And Katie Looper.
Laura Harris.
That was amazing.